Now it's time for Lefties losing it. And don't we have a treat coming up for you? The lunacy at Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing. You won't want to miss the incoherent meltdowns. But first to this lefty who is reinventing the gender wheel, claiming the sex of a baby on an ultrasound can't possibly be right.
The parts you see on an ultrasound don't determine a baby's gender. And how is that possible? Well, think about it like this marker. A blue cap usually means a blue marker, but sometimes marker caps get switched, and in this case, it is a pink marker. See, that's what happened to me. They saw something on the ultrasound that usually means it's a boy, but the cap was cap, and I turned out to be a girl.
Oh, it's all very lucrative now using Crayola pens to determine gender. Who's going to tell him that swapping caps makes no difference to the parts you're born with? But cute try, very cute, very sweet. Now to Donald Trump's impending inauguration. Can't come soon enough. And he's picked to perform America the Beautiful, Carrie Underwood. And the news has truly shattered and destroyed the has-been hyenas over at The View. In fact, it's yet another hard knock for them.
I wouldn't do it, even though I can't sing. You would not sing? No, I would not. I would not normalize him. And she says, I love our country. How do you love your country and support and normalize somebody who was a convicted felon who really wants to destroy the country, in my opinion? I don't understand how you say you love your country at the same time as you normalize this convicted felon, which I can say now every day.
And have we heard from Sonny Austin yet? A smiley, true delight of a woman.
I agree with you, Joy. I can't sing a lick, but I certainly, and I have not been asked, but if I were asked, it would be a hard no.
Well, thank goodness we clarified that one. We were losing sleep. We wanted to know the answer to that, and no doubt Sonny's announcement would come as to a shock to Donald Trump himself. And it's not just The View. This is the worst day of the feminist cult's lives.
Carrie Underwood is going to perform at Trump's inauguration.
Now to Gavin Newsom, the hapless and hopeless California governor who is really living up to his name as a slimy used car salesman. Can someone please explain the shoulder shimmy?
We're dealing with a myriad of issues. I was just talking to Josh Green, the governor down in Hawaii, who had some ideas around some land use concerns he has around speculators coming in, buying up properties.
How's that? A little smile, a little shimmy, a little dance, manicured hair, fresh Botox. A real man of the people in the middle of a fire zone, isn't he? And here he is again, showing just how personable he is.
My humble position, and it's not just being naively optimistic, that only reinforces the imperative of moving quickly, doing in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation.
He's overstimulated, perhaps taking California dreaming way too far. And never mind Gavin Newsom's failures to prepare the state for fires, because you can always trust Whoopi Goldberg to give the best possible explanation.
Here's how this works. There was a fire catastrophe in California. Had to do with winds. You know how they're always saying, oh, the wind. It actually does. The winds move things and sparks move things. And it doesn't matter how much water you have if 900,000 buildings go up at the same time.
Wow, how was that? It is good to know that Whoopi is such an expert on wind. And speaking of loony explanations,
I want to take a minute to talk about looting, because I think it's worth considering why people would run into an active fire to steal stuff rather than fleeing the fire. And it seems like in the media coverage that I'm listening to that people think that people are just like greedy who want to be looting. And I'm just wondering if maybe these people have actually considered whether it is safer for them to run into a fire or to continue to exist within capitalism without access to resources. And after weighing the pros and cons, they concluded that the safer option is to run into the fire to steal stuff.
Yes, that absolutely makes total sense. Total sense, doesn't it? Now to Pete Hegseth being hounded by bitter banshees at a Senate committee. And I've got to say, this basically just sums it up.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Veterans organizations that will help our veterans get every damn thing that they deserve because they signed on the dotted line to keep us safe.
Says it all, isn't it? But, you know, look, it wouldn't be a Lefties losing it without actually taking you through the Lefties losing it. So let's start with Elizabeth Warren, the delightful Elizabeth Warren, banging and carrying on.
In other words, you're quite sure that every general who serves should not go directly into the defense industry for 10 years. But you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
Uh-oh, the gotcha didn't quite work there. And the yelling theatrical sideshow didn't end there.
In the DOD, everything you've said in these public statements is politics. I don't want women. I don't want moms. What's wrong with a mom, by the way? Once you have babies, you therefore are no longer able to be lethal. I mean, you're basically saying women, after they have children, can't ever serve in the military in a combat role. It's a silly thing to say. It's a silly thing to say, beneath the position that you are aspiring to. To denigrate LGBTQ service members is a mistake. If you are a sharpshooter, you're as lethal regardless of what your gender identity is, regardless of who you love.
And it just doesn't end there. It didn't end there because cue what appeared to be a drunk and incoherent Mazie Hirono from Hawaii.
Would you use our military to take over Greenland or an ally of Denmark?
Senator, one of the things that President Trump is so good at is never strategically tipping his hand. And so I would never in this public forum give one way or another direct what orders the president would give me in any context.
That sounds to me that you would contemplate carrying out such an order to basically invade Greenland and take over the Panama Canal.
Yes, they really brought the big ones out from Hawaii for this one, didn't they? And then the Democrats' tragic attempt at a gotcha moment backfired yet again.
Can you give me an experience or your actual experience of driving innovation in an organization? Give me an example of where you have done that.
Oh my goodness, Senator, absolutely. At Concerned Veterans for America, we created the Fixing Veterans Healthcare Task Force, a bipartisan task force that never been done before, to create policy, to drive policy change on Capitol Hill that organizations fought ferociously against. We got the VA Accountability Act passed and the Mission Act passed in a way that a nonprofit of our size, veterans organization, has never done. And that's testified in all the letters that we put forward to the committee, which are on the record.
I have limited time.
Joining me now with plenty more Lefties losing it content is Newsweek Deputy Opinion Editor Bhatia Ungasagan. Bhatia, thank you so much for joining me. Let's start with that brilliant performance by Pete Hegseth at the Senate confirmation hearing. Not only did he have to battle with lunatic congressmen and women, the hearing was interrupted multiple times by protesters. Have a look at this.
Thank you for figuratively and literally having my back.
You are a misogynist. Not only that, you are a Christian Zionist. And you support the war in Gaza.
And readiness.
We send money to bomb children in Gaza. Shame on all of you. We need money. We need money for veterans committing suicide. Veterans are homeless.
Only $8 billion to Israel to slaughter children. That's the recruiting crisis.
Bhatia, considering this complete clown show, Pete Hegseth absolutely owned that hearing. Why do the left love this performative and theatrical chaos so much?
It's so funny. You know, all of these people who are angry about a policy that he would have no power over or control over if he was confirmed as head of DOD, just completely irrelevant. And you're so right about the performativity of it. I believe many of those protesters were from Code Pink, which just shows up and says the same stuff over and over, irregardless of, you know, what the event is. He really handled himself very well. I thought he was very respectful, including to the Democratic senators, some of whom were very aggressive in their questioning of him. I do think there was one missed opportunity, which is Elizabeth Warren brought up that he has said, I think quite rightly, that generals should not be allowed to take positions in the private sector in the defense industry for 10 years after they resign. And she asked him, well, would you hold yourself to that same standard? And his answer was, well, I'm not a general, which many people laughed at. But honestly, that was a moment I thought for a little bit of populist bipartisanship. Why not say, of course, as head of DOD, I would be in a position to be corrupted if I didn't make that same promise. I wish he had done that. But aside from that, I thought his performance was really impeccable. Of course, his wife was sitting there supporting him, and he really acquitted himself with a lot of dignity.
I completely agree. He was being hounded by these senators, and every answer he gave was so poised while they were, banging on the tables. They were carrying on. So I actually think he did exceptionally well under the circumstances. Now, Bhatia, what on earth is happening with the leadership team at the City of Los Angeles? First, of course, Mayor Karen Bass delivered this rather bizarre and uncomfortable performance when she was asked why she trotted off to Ghana in the middle of the bushfire crisis.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position? Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster?
And now we find out that her deputy mayor, Brian Williams, was reportedly placed on administrative leave last month after the FBI raided his home in connection to an alleged bomb threat he made against City Hall. Bhatia, this guy was overseeing the LA Fire Department. How on earth are these people running the city?
You know what's so amazing to me is that the rank and file firefighters have been able to perform an almost inhuman level of competence, saving hundreds and thousands of people's lives at a time when this insane act of God has burned so much of Los Angeles, and yet the leadership is so utterly incompetent. And I think it's not just on this front, right? California has become a symbol of the broken contract between Democratic leadership and the voters and the citizens who, on a host of issues, whether it's homelessness or crime or just a functioning city, they look to their leaders and they just see these empty suits like Karen Bass or, what is Gavin Newsom but a good haircut on top of a suit, right? I mean, there's just nothing happening there. And I really think that, it is both the case that anybody would have struggled with a disaster of this magnitude and the case that these two have come to represent in these moments, just the absolute absence of Democratic leadership, especially in a place like California. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. People look for leadership during these times of crisis, and my heart goes out to them because there simply is no leadership right now. And speaking of, dozens of looters have been caught sneaking into ritzy neighbourhoods in LA following those wildfires. More than 40 people have since been named and shamed by the Santa Monica Police Department. Bhatia, how big of an issue is this now?
Oh gosh, what a horrible, horrible thing to see in a moment that should be unifying, and I think really has been unifying, because of course it looks to us that this was a tragedy that struck the very rich because so many movie stars have lost their homes, but there were a lot of working class and middle class neighborhoods that were also hit very, very hard. And there's been a lot of unity and coming together and people demanding better on behalf of each other and their fellow Americans and fellow Californians. And then to see something like this, isn't it just so heartbreaking that there are people who would take advantage of us in the weakest, most vulnerable moments?
No, it's just absolutely awful to hear that this is happening. Now, let's move on now. We've got to talk about MSNBC. It really seems as though it keeps going downhill for that liberal lunatic network. And of course, it's all happening days before Donald Trump returns to the White House. But now its president, Rashida Jones, has announced that she is stepping down after 4 years in the role. Bhatia, between the failing, the dismal ratings, the crazy hosts who are so desperate, a restructure, and now they've lost their boss. The question has to be asked, what does the future hold for MSNBC?
I have to tell you, MSNBC, getting rid of its boss, Mark Zuckerberg, out there with the mea culpas, it really makes me sick to my stomach because they are out there pretending like they did not intentionally try to turn half of the country against the other half just because they failed. Now suddenly they're saying we're going to turn over a new leaf. We're going to do the right thing. They are just following the vibes. They are just following the winds and bowing to pressure again. Now, it happens to be pressure to the people who have always wanted what's best for this country, bowing to pressure to people who want to unify the country. But don't for a second believe that these people have anything but a profit motive at stake here. They're not doing this because they've had a come to Jesus moment. Whatever they say, they're doing this because the country has turned against the divisiveness of progressive politics. And so they're now trying to ride the wave. And what is that wave? It's the unity that President Trump has brought with him by unifying the working class in this country. And on the one hand, yeah, it's great that they're going to stop calling everybody racist and stop calling everybody names and stop trying to demonize people as Nazis and as Hitler. But on the other hand, it's going to be a long road to build back the trust that they squandered when they really tried to turn Americans against each other.
Absolutely. And while they persist with these crazy hosts like the joyless Joy Reid, realistically, that there is no hope for MSNBC, seriously, that they're just a joke of a network. Now, Bhatia, the leftist DC mayor has distanced herself from an anti-Trump ad displaying the city's official logos. Keep DC trash free. As you can see, this ad reads, featuring a MAGA hat, wearing man holding a copy of Project 2025 with a red line through his head, and the logos for the District of Columbia Department of Public Works and the Mayor's Office of the City Clean program. Now, the Mayor's Office has since claimed that they had no part in creating or authorising this ad, but Bhatia, it's quite incredible that something like this could have ever been produced in the first place. It says plenty about what sort of a place DC has become.
Oh, absolutely. And if this had happened 4 years ago or 8 years ago, she probably would have been taking credit for it, right? This is how you see that we're really in a new moment, and I'm so grateful for it. You do see people on the left trying to distance themselves from just the absolutely toxic rhetoric around Donald Trump over the last decade. I think they've been really chastened by their voters, and there are people who want to say, okay, how can we make our way back to the center? How can we once again represent working class voters? Whether they want to hear the answer to that question is a very different story.
Yeah, it is a very different story, but gee, it just speaks volumes, doesn't it? Now, look, you mentioned the inauguration. We're only days away from it. It couldn't come soon enough. Finally, we're at that pointy end. But I've got to ask you about these reports that Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg will all be in attendance with a prominent spot at that ceremony. But, I mean, these tech CEOs, they've always really been rivals, but now they're all on the same side in a way. What does that suggest in your view?
All right, I may be reading too much into this, but to me, this actually looks like a little bit of a downgrading of Elon Musk, who has, of course, been Donald Trump's, number two since he won the election. He's in every photo. He's next to him at Mar-a-Lago all the time. But at the inauguration, he's going to be seated along with every other tech titan who paid $1 million toward Trump's transition team. And I have to say, I feel relieved to see that because, of course, you have all of these people now bending the knee to Trump, trying to ingratiate themselves, people like Jeff Bezos and Zuckerberg, who were so anti-Trump for so long. But I am glad to see Elon Musk put back in his place. That is where he belongs. He has a very close relationship with China, like everybody in Silicon Valley is constantly bending the knee to China and to China's demands. And so I feel a little bit relieved to see him put back in the company of those others so that Donald Trump can make good on his promises to the American people in his real America First push on issues like immigration, which of course the MAGA movement and Elon Musk have been at loggerheads over, and also punishing China for all of the ways in which it continues to be our greatest adversary.
That's a really good point. It's certainly putting them back in their place, that's for sure. Now, look, let's talk about TikTok, because there have been reports that Chinese officials were in preliminary talks about a potential option to sell TikTok's operations in the US to Elon Musk, should the app be unable to avoid an impending ban over there. TikTok has since dismissed that. Bhatia, what do you think could happen here? It's very interesting to me because there are over 170 million users in the US alone, many of whom who have built platforms and businesses. They're making money now from this app. It's so popular. If Elon Musk doesn't step in and buy it, is it really the end in the US?
I think it might be. The Chinese have indicated that they would rather completely delete the app than sell it. I think it's very interesting if it does go to Elon Musk, what that says again about his relationship with China, because they would rather delete the app than allow an American to buy it, except Elon Musk, right? Which tells you a lot about that relationship with the CCP. But okay, they're denying it for now. They're not known for telling the truth. I do think that it could happen that TikTok will simply disappear from our phones. It presents a major national security risk. The Chinese are constantly stealing data off of people's phones. It's also very unhealthy for children. We know that there are kids who committed suicide because the algorithm on TikTok led them down that dark road. And most importantly, the Chinese don't allow their own children to use this, which tells you a lot about how they think it impacts children. They have their own Chinese version, which is incredibly educational and very boring. Apparently, it's impossible to stay on it for more than 20 minutes without getting bored out of your mind and shutting out of it. So I think it can either sell it to an American or get rid of it. Selling it to Elon Musk is like allowing the Chinese to keep operating it, in my opinion.
Yeah, look, fair enough. I'll be very curious. I know there's a lot of TikTok users over the US who are crying over this decision, yes. But yeah, it remains to be seen, doesn't it? Now, before we let you go, there's a lot of conversation surrounding a ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. But yeah, how would something like this benefit Israel?
So Israelis are very divided on this because they feel that the deal it's very complicated. On the one hand, they're going to get back 33 hostages. Not all of them are alive, but they will get back all of the remaining women, including the women soldiers who were horrifically captured by Hamas. So this is obviously a huge win. On the other hand, they feel that they will not be allowed to continue prosecuting the war to the fullest extent. I think this is a great deal. I think Donald Trump knew exactly what he was doing when he put Steve Witkoff in charge of this. Steve Witkoff, who showed up and said to Bibi Netanyahu, we're going to do this President Trump's way, and he wants those hostages released. And so you're going to have to say hello. And then Steve Witkoff went to Qatar, where he has a really good relationship with the Qataris and managed to get Hamas to the table. So I think, first of all, it's a great deal to see those girls home in the arms of their fathers and mothers. I cannot wait for the moment. I don't think Donald Trump is going to allow Israel to be in a weak position vis-a-vis Hamas. I think that he will reward them for doing this. And I think that this is an example of what we can expect from Donald Trump's foreign policy more broadly. He is the deal maker. He knows how to make the Middle East do what he thinks it should do. My friend Zed Jelani says Donald Trump is kind of like a Gulf Arab, you know? He sends his son-in-law and his, Orthodox Jews and, rich developers to go over there and push his interests and get a good deal. And, that's what he did. And he's not even president yet. There was one of the Arab officials in Doha gave an interview and he said Donald Trump, through Steve Witkoff, got more done in one conversation with Netanyahu than Biden did in the 2 years since October 7th. And I think that just speaks volumes. Thank God, Baruch Hashem, we are in a new era. And I truly hope that, all of those people come home, that the families whose hostages, family members who are hostages are dead, get their bodies so they can give them a proper burial. And this should never, ever happen again.
Yeah, we all hope and pray for the same. Bhatia Ungar Sargon, always really great to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this evening.